today together with my colleagues from Azerbaijan, Anar Orujev and Bakhtiyar Hajiyev, and myself, Emiz Husseinov. We would like to deliver our messages and statements on behalf of all critical voices in Azerbaijan, which is continue their struggle and for protecting OSCE values as like human rights, democracy, and accountability, and other fundamental freedoms. I'm based in Geneva, in exile, since 2015, as my colleague Anar Orujev is also based in exile in Germany, but we are continuing our work on Azerbaijan from our exile-based offices. But my colleague Bakhtiyar Hajiyev just came from Baku, and we would like to give him floor first because he's came from Baku, and he's recently extremely seriously tortured few times per year, just on systematically basis. He's kidnapped by the law enforcement agencies, humiliated, and I think it's better if he's tell his stories by himself. Today we have also great and brave journalists from exile, like Ismail Jalilov here. We have another colleague from Baku, Mehman Husseinov, and many other familiar faces from partner organizations. Thanks for attending, because we know for in other countries it's not only problematical state in OSCE area, Azerbaijan, many other states like Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and other authoritarian states which has used the same practice against their own critical voices. But thanks for finding the time and join us today. So please, Bakhtiyar, make your first statement, and after we will continue with Anar, and after we can start Q&A session.
Thank you, Emin. Suddenly, 4 masked people attacked me in the center of Baku under CCTV cameras, and I thought initially that these individuals belong to law enforcement entities. I did not resist. I thought that I will end up in either at the Ministry of Internal Affairs or in one of the departments of the ministry. So I did not resist, but they took me outside of the capital. There was a black hood on my head. I did not hear, I did not see anything, so they transferred me to another car. I still didn't expect that they will either torture me or humiliate me, but suddenly they took me to an apartment space in a bathroom. They started to strip me naked and then asked me who orders to criticize the Minister of Internal Affairs. I told them that nobody asked me to criticize the Minister of Interior. I have some issues with that person, and I basically raised some legitimate questions. The ministry attacked me several times, and I respond. So they started to urinate on me, and they were filming everything to a GoPro camera, and they said that if you speak up about this incident, if you speak up again, and if you criticize our minister, you will be raped and you will be killed. And approximately like a couple of weeks later, another journalist, Aytan Mammadova, was attacked in front of her apartment building. She was coming back home, and she suddenly saw an unidentified person who attacked her with a knife, pointed the knife towards her throat, and she was asked to stop covering some criminal cases, criminal court cases. And she was threatened with her daughter. Anar's brother, Aziz Orujev, also was attacked several times in Baku, and he was followed by a person. He was able to take his photo and video, and he submitted photos of that person who was following him to the Minister of Internal Affairs. That person was found, but there was no criminal case against him opened, and the Minister of Internal Affairs did not investigate none of these cases. There are many other cases while Azerbaijani government attacked journalists during their coverage of protest actions. Some of them were threatened with life, and these are cases that I mentioned that were made public, but there are many more in which cases victims of those tortures decided not to speak up because they were afraid that these are credible threats and they may face other consequences, including their family members can be attacked for speaking up. So simply they decided to terminate their activities. And all of these threats and attacks were related to their professional work. And recently, Avaz Zeynallı, a prominent Azerbaijani journalist, was arrested, and he may face up to 12 years in prison. And charges against him are also fabricated and also politically motivated. He and many others, including another journalist, Abid Gafarov, were covering mainly Tartar case, where law enforcement entities tortured hundreds of Azerbaijani soldiers and servicemen. And as a result of this torture process, at least 10 people passed away. And just because of the work of these journalists, brave journalists and political analysts and activists, the Azerbaijani government decided to renew the investigation recently, and up-to-date real perpetrators of those tortures are not imprisoned. So these are just some examples of cases how Azerbaijani government treats journalists, bloggers, and activists, and in some cases ordinary citizens. Just in May, I listed up to 30 individuals, like ordinary citizens, who were imprisoned or detained for up to 30 days of administrative detention just because of the fact that they wrote either critical comments about the Minister of Internal Affairs or liked critical comments. Like they just simply pushed one like button and they ended up in prison for 30 days. My expectation from the international community is that we have to respond because I observed personally complete silence from the European Parliament, from the EU institutions, from OAC, from the United States in some cases, despite the fact that I like to thank the State Department for reacting quickly and at least demanding the Azerbaijani government to start investigations, but this is not enough. This has to change. Azerbaijan is a member of the Council of Europe, and Azerbaijan has to behave as a member of the European Council of Europe. Azerbaijan has to respect its international obligations, and Azerbaijani authorities have to either respect their international obligations or face consequences for that. And what can these consequences be? In my opinion, Azerbaijani officials also need to face targeted individual sanctions. Because when it comes to Russia and Belarus, we see that Western democracies, they impose sanctions on individuals who violate human rights. But it is very important to impose these sanctions as a preventive measure instead of allowing those officials and those governments to be empowered so much that in order to attack another country. For example, in Russia's case, I strongly believe that if these sanctions that were imposed in 2022 were imposed in 2008 when Russia attacked Georgia, we wouldn't have such a kind of out-of-touch dictator in Russia, and we will probably have better situation in Belarus, but there was a long inaction and silence from the Western side. There were some politicians who believed that we can engage Putin, we can start negotiations with Alexander Lukashenko, we can reset our foreign policy, we can find ways for dialogue, but in 2022 we understood that it doesn't work. This approach doesn't work, so if there are some obligations, there have to be consequences as well. So my call is to international organizations is to start discussions, to impose at least visa sanctions against individuals who are behind these tortures, behind these grave violations, because it hurts activists and journalists in Azerbaijan to see that they have to go through a very difficult process in order to get Schengen visa or UK visa or US visa. In many cases, they receive rejections from embassies, including recently, like the German embassy rejected Khadija Ismailova's case, who was a former political prisoner, who is an investigative journalist, who is well known, but she received a rejection letter from German embassy. But officials who are behind these tortures, they and their family members can freely travel to Europe, to the United States, to the United Kingdom, buy properties there, check their bank accounts, get treatments. They take their family members for vacation in these countries, and with fresh blood and fresh energy, they come back to Azerbaijan in September, October, to start a new wave of repressions against civil society. So this has to change. This is my main and the only message here. Thank you.
As I would just want to remind, for Bakhtiar is former prisoner of conscience. He spent few years in Azerbaijani custody, and under international pressure he's able to release, but he still spent he's Harvard alumni. He spent all his life to help young people to make themselves. But today, if you see that, like one of our colleagues, we have other examples as in Bakhtiar's case, but we were glad to give now floor to Anar Orjov. He's editor-in-chief of the Channel 13 and founder, and he's also specialized on the investigative stories. And they have a very huge network of independent media, several YouTube channels. And please, and his brother also staying with my brother inside the prison. And today we're glad to see former president of OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, George Tseretelli. And we ask, that's why we would like to mention, for OSCE it's quite helpful and strong institutions when we're able to ask OSCE Parliamentary Assembly President to engage with Azerbaijani government and tell them and ask them release our colleagues. After these successful meetings, they sometimes release. And my brother today is free, is here. Anar's brother still in Azerbaijan. We hope to join us for the future event. But it's hard. That's how system work. We are protect same the values, but with same stakeholders supposed to do same different activities. Please, Anar, the floor is yours, and after Anar, I can deliver my short.
Thank you, Emin. I would like also to welcome all of you, and I would like also to again join what my colleagues said here, that regarding the Emin's note about Mr. Tseretelli's invention to our brother's case in Azerbaijan, and Mehmana and Aziz, they were in prison in Azerbaijan, and we had really very limited contacts with them. Every contact with them, every information to get from them, it was really useful for us, and in that hard times, including Mr. Tseretelli, a lot of colleagues from the international community helped us, and I strongly believe that why Mehman is here, why my brother still is not in prison, that's the result of the pressures of international community to Azerbaijan government. That's why it is very important always to feel this support from the international community. Regarding the pressures to Azerbaijani journalists, I just tried to write several cases which I know, and I see that if I will call all of them, it could take a lot of time. That what happened to just to members of my team, Channel 13's team in Baku, Azerbaijan, just the one of our journalists, maybe you have heard about it, Abbas, obviously. He also was the active member of the LGBT plus community in Baku. He was killed in February this year. And of course, we don't demand that he was killed by someone who is inspired by the government or some sort, but the person who made this brutal crime, he got just 9 years, 6 months in prison. So this is also, we accept that this is somehow the impunity, and it's not adequate answer to this criminal case. Another case is related with our with the pressure to journalists. As Bakhtiar, he also mentioned them. As Zorojov, again, he faced 2 times serious pressures this year. One time he just was followed by a person and was threatened by the person for his professional journalist activity, and this person gave the very clear message that if you do it again, you will see what will happen. We applied to Minister of Internal Affairs about it. There was no reaction from them. After several days, the person following the Aziz, my brother, in Baku, and in that case, he was able to take photo and video of the person and publicize this in his Facebook profile. And only after that, the person was detained by the Minister of Internal Affairs. But as a result of it, you can imagine, the person was called that person with the mental illness. So we cannot do anything against this person because he is internally sick, and the only thing we can do, we can force him to go for the treatment. The one new case which happened against us, it happened just 15th of September this year. Aziz, again, he was called to General Prosecutor Office to Baku. He was officially warned, based on the Azerbaijan legislation, information, informatization, and information protection, and on national security, like the videos which published by Channel 13. It's damaged the reputation of Azerbaijani army. But in fact, all these pressures, this is related with the independent media activity and the publishing of the many of the materials about the critical materials about the government. And it is not the last one, and it will continue now about it. Just what would like to ask you again and again to be with us in this struggle and to support us even to continue with the negotiations with the Azerbaijan government, or as Bakhtiar mentioned, maybe some sanctions could be very helpful. That we see that when the international community going to talk with Azerbaijani government to solve any of the problems, then we can get some good results. So the only thing maybe in this case, we are going to continue our work, of course. I'm in exile more than, as Amy mentioned, more than 8 years, and we, at that time, where the online channel 13 had less than 100,000 subscribers, but right now we have more than 1 million subscribers. So all these 8 years we grow and continue our independent media activity. But also we need to feel this support from your side. It could be also some financial support. It could be the support for the protection of the journalists in Azerbaijan from the Azerbaijani government's pressures. There's something also I just briefly would like to say that I tried to classify the pressures to the journalists in Azerbaijan. That is the physical pressures, psychological pressures. I called it the juridical pressures, arrest of journalists, direct pressures from the state actors, pressures by a group of oligarchs or officials. One of the problems of media, as I told, that impunity against the people who committed crimes against the journalists. Also, the one serious problem for the Azerbaijani independent media, that problems in accreditation by the state bodies. So we cannot get the accreditation to get the direct information from the state. But if you will have any question, I will be glad to answer them. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you, Anar. And I'm absolutely agree with most of my colleagues, and I would like to add another, like a digital threat, which is, you know, Azerbaijani government during the few years successfully used digital surveillance, especially spyware software, which is produced by Israeli NSO group against thousands of critical voices in my country. Right now, this is not only Azerbaijan, 11 member states of the Council of Europe, but its numbers of the victims, it's, let's say, with 10 countries of the Council of Europe members, incomparable with Azerbaijan. Each country, like Poland, they have 5 to 10 cases, or Spain have also from 5 to 10%, or Greece, or Hungary. But Azerbaijan, imagine, in Azerbaijan with 10 million population, we have 1,000 victims. In India, Indian government also uses software against their opponents with 1.5 billion population. They have only less than 100 cases in India, but in Azerbaijan, rich regime use like taxpayers' monies for check what we are doing. We don't do anything illegal. But during the recent incident between Armenia and Azerbaijan, what we observed also, like Azerbaijani government used illegally blackout, like when its internet connection is cut, when it's TikTok, Instagram, and other social media blocked. It's this steps doing illegally by Ministry of Nation, State Service of State Security Services, illegally, without any court decision. They're just doing like this. In 2020, recently, what we have, like people, no matter who you are, like you are a famous journalist or you are like a not well-known blogger from the village, you are in the prison. And we have it since from beginning of the year, like several defamational charges when the government decided to prosecute their opponents by defamational charges. And this brings to people to the prison just to express themselves. And another colleague of mine, like a young activist from the 18 movement, he just write critical posts, like it's just peaceful posts, like for organization against war between Azerbaijan and Armenia. And that is also, they said, they put him for 30 days administrative detention center. And he's lucky because it's like it's international attention. They just put him for 30. But many people spend years in the prison. And Bakhtiar mentioned Avaz Zeynali case. For Avaz Zeynali is already second imprisonment. It's like revolving door. You are there, released you, they start to improve your critical activities, you're getting big numbers of subscribers in your YouTube channel, and after they put you to prison back. With other cases, like Anar mentioned case of Avaz Hafizli, it's like his original surname like Avaz Sheikh Mamadov. This guy worked with a 5 exile-based media, including with Kanal 13, with Objective TV, with Meydan TV, and others. They are freelance journalists. Like imagine 25-year, like young journalist, which is fight, and he is also famous LGBT activist. He received threats during the last 2 years before his murder, publicly, not anonymously, from state-oriented, like a pro-government oriented youth activists, influencers with 100,000 like pro-governmental YouTubers, which is they say for which you should kill them. They are like shame for Azerbaijani journalism and for Azerbaijani civil society. This guy, which helped him to apply to the Ministry of Internal Affairs with official request to protect them. We have a special article in criminal code, and in our constitution it's written if even journalists receive threats, state's supposed to protect them. But nobody protected, and now he's murdered. Government says it's domestic violence and put this his killer, but who is the order? And I just want to remind you for This murder happened day when Aliyev and Putin signed in the Moscow strategical agreement, when the just day before war in Ukraine started. Imagine why it's happened. We have response. We can prepare this special investigative report regarding this case and share with you. But I want to switch to another cases, because we have now only 10 journalists and bloggers in the prison, some of them illegally detained in territory of the neighbor countries, delivered to Azerbaijan. For example, we have two cases when outspoken bloggers, they are not professional journalists, but they are criticized regime. Even one of them, like, criticized regime from Russia, he's escaped to Ukraine. And Ukraine, like even the Zelensky administration, I think it's by mistake, and also we know who is helped to extradite this guy. It's Azerbaijani General Prosecutor Deputy, which is his brother, head of the SOCAR Ukraine, Gunduz Mamad. He's orchestrated this, and two bloggers illegally extradited to Azerbaijan. Now every day they are under a strong pressure, and they are tortured him. Regarding our neighbor country, Georgia seems like a Rose Revolution in 2004. For us, it's like some kind of indicator how a country able to switch from organizing crime ruling regime to successful young democracy. And we are always establish all our side events there. Even after 2014, when government closed our organizations and we're staying like without any state registrations, without offices which is sealed by the general prosecutor until today, I moved to Switzerland, but Switzerland host me and provide me like refugee status. But I'm not staying in Geneva. I moved back to cross-border territory. I'm staying from 2015 until 17 in exile in Georgia, because it's easy for you to organize the trainings, train new generation representatives to be bloggers or journalists or human rights defenders. But they start to follow us in Georgia, and they try to kidnap me, but I'm able to escape. But another my colleague, brave investigative journalist, Afgan Muhtarli, he's kidnapped by Azerbaijani law enforcement agencies and by Azerbaijani diplomats, which is work in Georgia, and also by the help of the Georgian state's security services. Imagine. Now you understand for cheap gas is not good solution, but why you betrayed your own principle and leave us alone without political, institutional, and other help. And we would like to address to like-minded states, to OSCE leadership, to protect these democratic and human rights values to shoulder with us, and don't leave us alone, because even we are still continuing in exile, we're also not super safe. I just want to finalize. Many my colleagues also, maybe some of them not professional journalists, maybe some of them using very strong language against the government, they try to kill them simply outside of the, even on the Schengen zone territory. Like one journalist, he received 3 life threats. They sent 3 groups of the assassins since from 2020, 2021, 2022. And we would like to ask another OSCE member states to address to Azerbaijani governments to attack critical voices in other OSCE member states. Thanks for your attention. And now we have a Q&A session. Please, Ismail, Jalil with you.
Very much for your remarks and for your bravery, especially to those people, those of us who are still in Azerbaijan. I guess that's a whole different standard of dealing with pressure that the rest of us, at least I can say for myself, I couldn't. Bakhtiar and Mehman, thank you very much for doing what you're doing from inside the country. Let me ask you this. I want to start where you, Emin, left off. International pressure. The winter is coming. I remember when I put this meme online, people were laughing and finding humor in this, but the winter truly is coming to Europe, and you know, I stylized it as Game of Thrones. Yeah, the winter is coming to Europe, and the winter is going to be a challenging one. Does it seem like the West, and I'm using this term maybe incorrectly, but Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Central Europe, and the United States and Canada, they're falling into the same pit as before. They're making the same mistake as they did with Russia. Maybe with Russia they did not know what they're doing, but now they cannot not know what they're doing. You have to pay for cheap gas, and you pay for cheap gas with a very difficult currency, with rolling back democratic reforms. What are we doing wrong in Azerbaijan or outside of Azerbaijan in trying to explain to the people in the West that you cannot sort of close your eyes to human rights violations and press freedom violations in our countries? Because in the end, you'll have to pay for it much more than if you had confronted the dictatorships head on from the beginning. This is my question. What are we doing wrong? Are we not speaking the right language? Are we not talking to the right people? Are we not knocking on the right doors? I want to direct our criticism inward rather than outward. I understand we all want to complain about what Europe is doing or not doing, what my country, the United States, is doing or not doing, but let's look at ourselves for a second. Are we doing everything right? I believe Bakhtiar would like to answer. Thank you very much again.
And I had several conversations with some of Azerbaijani former ambassadors and current ambassadors, and I asked them, how does silent diplomacy work behind closed doors? And they said, okay, this is the way how it works. If there is a meeting for 2 hours, like 1 hour and 55 minutes is dedicated to energy security, economic issues, and when diplomats, top diplomats, including EU diplomats, leave the room, they say, by the way, we receive a lot of criticism from the Amnesty International, Human Rights Foundation, like human rights organizations, other organizations. Can you just take some steps so that we can go back to our countries and say that we raised Bakhtiar's case or Emin's case or Mehman's case? So this is the way how silent diplomacy works, and for years we accepted this approach. This is our main mistake. The second mistake is that we have to start a naming and shaming approach towards top EU officials who call Azerbaijan as a reliable partner, including Ursula von der Leyen, who visited Azerbaijan for a couple of hours, signed a gas deal without meeting civil society representatives, without meeting opposition leaders, without meeting journalists, and demonstrated that she is interested only in oil and gas. I completely understand the fact that the winter is coming. Europe needs alternative energy sources, but Azerbaijan does not provide energy resources to Europe for free. And if pipelines connect Azerbaijan and Europe in terms of energy, in terms of providing energy security, it has to bring these two, like the Europe and the Azerbaijani side together from a perspective of respecting fundamental human rights. So we have to stop making trade-offs between interests and values. We have to push top diplomats. And if that doesn't work, we have to name and shame and demand open statements instead of, like closed door, like silent diplomacy. This is my response.
We can give floor to another guest. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. Jeanne Gaveli, I'm head of Eastern Europe and Central Asia desk at RSF Reporters Without Borders. So I fully support what you've just said, Bakhtiar. And I just wanted to highlight to our maybe participating OC states here that of course journalists are hunted in Azerbaijan. Azerbaijani journalists are hunted abroad, but not only. They attack also foreign journalists in their own countries. as we've seen recently with Rasmus Kanbeck. We provided a statement last week on his case. His arrest since, especially since last May, by trolls and by the Azerbaijan diaspora in Sweden. So it's a Swedish journalist harassed in Sweden, even by the ambassador who, by the way, deleted his tweets after I've asked him for comments. This is a very worrying trend, especially after you spoke about Mohamed Mirzali. We supported him in France. He was not only threatened but also stabbed dozens of times in Nantes, in a city in France. So I think we have to go to a further step, to go to the diplomatic level publicly, to speak to the Azerbaijani government. I mean, for the diplomatic channels of the countries, OSCE country, to speak to the Azerbaijani government, for them to stop this interference in their country. And of course, we would support also targeted sanctions, visa sanctions, for instance, as you mentioned earlier. Thank you.
I am the Director for Europe and Eurasia Programs at Freedom House. So several things. I'm ruminating on how to answer your question, even though the question wasn't posed to me. And also just a comment. Freedom House has been tracking transnational repression for the last few years. We're trying to systematize, understand it as a phenomenon, and advocate on the issue. So I recommend everybody to look at some of our reports. I think they're useful. It's very clear that authoritarian regimes are not just content to sit at home and attack their dissidents at home, but to reach out and do so outside of the country. The Vakhtang Mukhtarli case is classic, but it's happening more and more. And I think it's something that the OSCE region in general, we need to be looking at it in a systematic way. This is one of the things I wanted to say. My attempt at the answer to your question about what are we doing wrong, right? What is international civil society? What's civil society and activists in Azerbaijan and exile, and in the rest of the region doing wrong? And I do think there's something about solidarity that we're losing. I think that's somehow or another, if you look at how Russian and Ukrainian human rights defenders, how hard a time they're having with one another, there was a time when Armenian and Azerbaijani human rights defenders and activists were actually speaking in one voice against both of their governments because they had at least that in common. That's true with Georgia, that's true with the rest. So I don't know, and I'm not trying to get into the details of conflict. I think it's sensitive and difficult, and human rights defenders are isolated enough in their societies. But somehow or another, we need, as a community, to figure out how to deal with that because it's only in solidarity that we're going to get anywhere. And then we can speak with one voice to international organizations and to institutions and the rest. And I think we would be more effective at changing things. Thanks.
At Critical Accountability, we are engaging with communities affected by oil and gas development in the Caspian region, and we've been working, trying to work closely with Shadinese, looking at Shadinese project and engaging with communities around Shadinese, including Sangachal. As you know, many of this project are financed by international financial institutions, including EBRD, who do have provisions in their code that they can only invest in projects that are compliant with basic understanding of human rights and civil society. And unfortunately, over the past 20 years, we see that we get more and more scarce information coming from Azerbaijan. For example, like 10 years ago, we could find reporters, we could find community members who were willing to give us information on what is happening in the community. Now, in our last report, we had to rely almost fully on satellite imagery because, as you know, people are scared to engage. People are, many of the reporters are exiled. And just overall, I want to reiterate how much we agree with our colleague, what you said, Ismail, about we cannot keep doing business as usual in Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan has a consistent track record of human rights violations. And recent examples with Russia show that if you keep closing your eyes on human rights violations because you want that energy, that just empowers the authoritarianism. So my question to you would be, do you see the potential in targeted sanctions against certain individuals, including like what the United States are now doing, seizing personal assets of business people, of government people, including the assets in the United States? Do you see the potential that this can change the situation? And my other question is not really related to that. To circle back to your comment about journalists being harassed in Georgia, we saw that too with some of the activists that we engaged with. They were harassed and beaten in Georgia. So I wonder if you can tell us a little bit more about this. How do these governments cooperate with each other? Why does Georgia allow that sort of harassment? And why do they have this sort of cooperation with Azerbaijan?
Thank you for reminding us on different important, I would say, sometimes painful facts. But in case of what you recalled, in the case of Mehman or Aziz Arojev at that time, I guess it was at that point quite effective and a positive cooperation with the Azerbaijani government. Maybe it was fortune of these people. And at that time, you remember that I also publicly thanked the authorities and the president for positive engagement or interference. But as we see, there are many problems here. And also I'd like to thank you for raising the issue of a Georgian journalist here, one of the leaders of opposition journalism and head of main TV channel, Nika Gorami. Of course, this is a very, very, I would say, grave example. And his charges are very dubious, and I guess the international community will pay more attention to this case. As you said, in this world, having these geopolitical challenges that we have around, I think solidarity and consolidation of international community, international organizations who are in this field, and sometimes not necessary to be in this field exactly, but to be in politics, to pay attention to the freedom of media, to the safety of journalism. That's, of course, one of the main values and the principles for any democratic society. So, and I agree with you that there should be much more attention to that. And it should not leave this in the rooms like this, and it should be then spread it. And you know, to use the silence diplomacy sometimes is effective. If it doesn't work, then you have to do other. You use other, let's say, weaponry. As I mentioned, with the war of Russia and Ukraine, many things are changing. I think there are different approaches even in relations with the countries. And somebody mentioned, maybe you, that now I would say importance of Azerbaijan is much more high. And we appreciate the closeness of Azerbaijan to the European countries, European Union, the West. But of course, everybody should keep in mind that this should not be an expense of any democratic developments, and I hope that the situation will be improved. Because being close to West, it means to, let's say, be in line with democratic principles. But I have a very practical, I would say, question. Many things are sometimes described by figures, and I knew figures before. Is there any dynamics you have? For instance, how many journalists were jailed or harassed previously, in, let's say 4 or 5 years, you would say this was to get this period there now. Is it any, let's say, I'm very sorry to asking that, but is there any, even any trend in that? So that's also maybe interesting. Thank you.
And in my opinion, that Azerbaijan is one country which is a news desert. We work in many countries of the world, including Belarus, Syria, Afghanistan, Myanmar, where one could think that the situation is much worse than in Azerbaijan. However, in those countries we still have hope, because in each of these countries we have a wide range of partners, stakeholders, civil society is strong and media is strong. But here I look at you guys, and you represent media sector, and this is very sad. And I think this is due to the fact that there is very limited donor attention and donor support to Azerbaijan. So I invite everyone in the room to consider not to forget Azerbaijan and not to forget Azerbaijani media, because if it continues like that, in 2 years there will be nobody to defend, because there will be no independent media in Azerbaijan. Thank you.
I would like to give floor now to my colleagues. Each of us have 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes, and we will finish this event. And we will glad to talk with you later.
Okay, I will use this 1.5 minutes for responding very briefly to questions of Elena and George. I had a round of meetings at the European Parliament in May. I met some MEPs, and some of them said that yes, we can make some statements about human rights violations in Azerbaijan, but we are afraid that our delegation may not get Azerbaijani visas, and we may not be able to travel to Azerbaijan. Let's postpone it until our visit, and then we can do it. So it works vice versa. For European members of the European Parliament, they are afraid of being targeted as a kind of like visa sanctions to Azerbaijan, while we were expecting the European Parliament or European institutions to impose visa sanctions on Azerbaijani officers. There are some mechanisms, like including Global Magnitsky Act, and we will submit some forms, some names, some officials and their family members to be included in that. Regarding positive engagement, I completely disagree with you. This is the approach of Azerbaijani government, that they imprison, in some cases, bloggers and human rights activists because they know that Europeans and US officials will start negotiations, and they will use these cases as bargaining chips in order to get something in exchange. So my message is very clear: human rights should not be a matter of negotiations. It has to be clear, the position has to be firm and clear and loud, that we don't want to tolerate any violations, because there are some lessons learned from, not only from Russia case, that if you want to get cheap energy, you have even more serious consequences in the next phase, but also Arab Spring process. We understand that, like, for years, some diplomats and some decision makers thought that providing stability at the expense of human rights is okay because it meets our interests. But in the long run, it became a serious security threat. So the same is expected for Azerbaijan. That's my response. Thank you.
Yes, very shortly, I also would like to mention that Azerbaijan is really a rich country, billions of euros, dollars from the oil. And the government, when started to put some of this money for the development of the regions in Azerbaijan, the corruption was at a very, very, very high level. There are more than 70 regions in Azerbaijan. The head of these regions, they are not president. They are not the workers of the president's administration. They are not the ministers. They are not the deputy of ministers. They are 10th level of officials from Azerbaijan, head of the very small regions all over the Azerbaijan. They are dollar millionaires. And all children of them, they are in Europe. They send them to study in Europe. They're coming to Europe for get treatment. They're coming to Europe as a tourist to spend the time here. So they bring their money here by buying, I don't know, hotels, different kind of they're investing here. So this kind of the sanctions, I think that is the much more powerful, could be much more powerful sanctions against the Azerbaijani government, and can urge them to change their attitude to this problem. Regarding the second question, I also agree with my colleague Bakhtiar that this is the human rights should be totally different element than the version with the energy, with the governance like the Azerbaijan, and the lessons learned just from Russia. It's the obvious proof of it. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to start with the questions why less and less reporting, and if you're not able to find sometimes freelance journalists or experts, my response is very clear. It's lack of funding for civil society. I'm absolutely agree with topics which is mentioned from Binar. It's not lack of funding to the civil society in Azerbaijan or in exile-based civil society, Azerbaijan civil. It's lack of funding also from international NGOs, which is usually working shoulder to shoulder with us, from Washington DC to Brussels to Geneva and other places. It's like the international stakeholders start to think about Azerbaijan as on Turkmenistan. You are going to more and more to hopeless directions, and even if you invest something to the civil society, we can't change anything. This is like lifetime dictatorship and dynasty, and why we need to support. But I want to remind to our colleague and guests, we are Council of Europe members. Even OSCE have some kind of invisible or sometimes less effective guidelines or rules. We are part of the Council of Europe, and we have a strong obligation in front of this institution as other European older democracies. But if you see, if government don't want to implement European Court for Human Rights judgments, and for example, our organizations, we also prepare less reporting on journalist safety programs. You know why? Because we have a lack of funding. We are leading journalist organization in Azerbaijan. For a few years, we're not able to receive any funds for journalist safety program. Nobody provides the funds. We have only one project on exposing corruption. We name these projects as kamikaze projects, which is nobody able to expose these corruptions. And me, together with Mehman and other brave colleagues, we are exposing this corruption, or high-level corruption in Azerbaijan. And this is peanuts, because we're able to do much more strong reporting, but they just give us, because they say sometimes they find the excuse, donors say how we able to supporting you, because it's restrictive law. I say, guys, all civil society organizations, even inside the countries, they have their headquarters in Baltic states, in Europe, in US. Go support international organization, and they can provide sub-grants for our colleagues. But we didn't see this funding downgraded, guys. And it's also, when we started talking about funding, now we're only talking for guys. We try to remind, can I ask auditory, anyone from OSCE special representative on media freedom here in the room? Anyone?
No,
could you see?
They have cited
No, I know, but they have 20 employees, and I'm tired to criticize them, even face to face. I'm working with the OSCE media representative since 2005. After 2020, when Azerbaijani government organized provocation and broke previous agreements, they just blocked nomination of Harlem this year, and another Secretary General from Switzerland, Thomas Grimminger, and other OSCE directors, they lose their position. That's what, after this, Office of Special Representative of Media Freedom, she will be less outspoken. She didn't do any critical statement for last 2 years, and I'm asking why, what's happened? I'm asked her last year, face to face. I'm not going public, but today, Ismail, when you say if I respond to what we're doing wrong, we are exposed caviar diplomacy, high-level corruption, how the Azerbaijani government bribe politicians, and we are continuing to do this. And we never give up, even if we have funding or not. I don't care about any funding. I will continue my work pro bono, never give up. and I will expose. And for me, I'm not diplomats. I don't care who you are, guys. You have obligation, if you have this, establish this institution, OEC, with clear values, I'm protecting these values with you. And you must be protected or you must be resigned. And we can find new OEC leadership, because it's never happened previously before, but now even Secretary General of OEC, she is less outspoken about human rights in Azerbaijan. ODIHR director, he's less outspoken about human rights in Azerbaijan. And Madam Representative on media freedom, she's less outspoken because Azerbaijan government pushed them via sabotage in elections, and they sometimes thinking about job safety policy for maybe government able to do this, but who does this? It's Azerbaijani government makes this sabotage. Turkey government and Turkmenistan government. You see, they are brotherhood of dictators. And you are like-minded, it's supposed to evaluate all of these leaders. And today, I think for one of our bigger allies still is like OEC Parliamentary Assembly. Many like Helsinki Commission members, they publicly like make a tweets, statements. Sometimes they are much more effective politicians because they don't care about, they are not depending by membership fees from this. And we will address to all OEC PA to also examine and evaluate OEC executive bodies and give them recommendations and lesson learned and show their mistake for how they're supposed to protect our joint values. Thanks for your attention. I'm so sorry for this emotional statement, but we would like to continue talking with you, and we're here until 3rd of October, and Bakhtiar, and yeah, thanks a lot. Sorry.